The modern scripture, a Zen Buddhist Bible, is brought to you by Not a Prophet org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. Chapter I, Discrimination, Thus Have I Heard. The Blessed One once appeared in the castle of Lanka, which is on the summit of Mt. Malaya in the midst of the great ocean. A great many Bodhisattvas had miraculously assembled from all the Buddha lands, and a large number of bhikshus were gathered there. The Bodhisattvas with Mahamati at their head were all perfect masters of the various samadhis, the tenfold self, mastery, the 10 powers, and the 6 psychic faculties. Having been anointed by the Buddha's own hands, they all well understood the significance of the objective world. They all knew how to apply the various means, teachings, and disciplinary measures according to the various mentalities and behaviors of beings. They were all thoroughly versed in the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, the 8 vajnanas, and the twofold egolessness. The Blessed One, knowing of the mental agitations going on in the minds of those assembled like the surface of the ocean, stirred into waves by the passing winds, and his great heart moved by compassion, smiled and said, "In the days of old the Tathagatas of the past who were arhats and fully enlightened ones came to the castle of Lanka on Mount Malaya, and discoursed on the truth of noble wisdom that is beyond the reasoning knowledge of the philosophers, as well as being beyond the understanding of ordinary disciples and masters, and which is realizable only within the inmost consciousness. For your sakes, I too would discourse on the same truth. All that is seen in the world is devoid of effort and action, because all things in the world are like a dream, or like an image miraculously projected. This is not comprehended by the philosophers and the ignorant, but those who thus see things see them truthfully. Those who see things otherwise walk in discrimination, and as they depend upon discrimination, they cling to dualism. The world as seen by discrimination is like seeing one's own image reflected in a mirror, or one's shadow, or the moon reflected in water, or an echo heard in the valley. People grasping their own shadows of discrimination become attached to this thing and that thing, and failing to abandon dualism, they go on forever discriminating, and thus never attain tranquility. By tranquility is meant oneness, and oneness gives birth to the highest samadhi, which is gained by entering into the realm of noble wisdom that is realizable only within one's inmost consciousness. Then all the Bodhisattvas rose from their seats and respectfully paid him homage, and Mahamati, the Bodhisattva, sustained by the power of the Buddhas, drew his upper garment over one shoulder, knelt, and pressing his hands together, praised him in the following verses. As thou reviewest the world with thy perfect intelligence and compassion, it must seem to thee like an ethereal flower of which one cannot say, it is born, it is destroyed, for the terms being and non-being do not apply to it. As thou reviewest the world with thy perfect intelligence and compassion, it must seem to thee like a dream of which it cannot be said, it is permanent or it is destructible, for being and non-being do not apply to it. As thou reviewest all things by thy perfect intelligence and compassion, they must seem to thee like visions beyond the reach of the human mind, as being and non-being do not apply to them. With thy perfect intelligence and compassion, which are beyond all limit, thou comprehendest the egolessness of things and persons, and art free and clear from the hindrances of passion and learning and egotism. Thou dost not vanish into nirvana, nor does nirvana abide in thee, for nirvana transcends all duality of knowing and known, of being and non-being. Those who see thee thus, serene and beyond conception, will be emancipated from attachment, will be cleansed of all defilement, both in this world and in the spiritual world beyond. In this world, whose nature is like a dream, there is place for praise and blame, but in the ultimate reality of Dharmakaya, which is far beyond the senses and the discriminating mind, what is there to praise, O thou most wise? Then said Mahamati the Bodhisattva, O Blessed One, Sugata, Arhat, and fully enlightened one, pray tell us about the realization of noble wisdom, which is beyond the path and usage of the philosophers, which is devoid of all predicates such as being and non-being, oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness, existence and non-existence, eternity and non-eternity, which has nothing to do with individuality and generality, nor false imagination, nor any illusions arising from the mind itself, but which manifests itself as the truth of highest reality, by which, going up continuously by the stages of purification, one enters at last upon the stage of Tathagatahood, whereby, by the power of his original vows unattended by any striving, one will radiate its influence to infinite worlds, like a gem reflecting its variegated colors, whereby I and other Bodhisattvas will be enabled to bring all beings to the same perfection. Virtue, said the Blessed One, well done, Mahamati, and again, well done, indeed. It is because of your compassion for the world, because of the benefit it will bring to many people, both humankind and celestial, that you have presented yourself before us to make this request. Therefore, Mahamati, listen well and truly reflect upon what I shall say, for I will instruct you. Then Mahamati and the other Bodhisattvas gave devout attention to the teaching of the Blessed One. Mahamati, since the ignorant and simple-minded, not knowing that the world is only something seen of the mind itself, cling to the multitudinousness of external objects, cling to the notions of being and non-being, oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness, existence and non-existence, eternity and non-eternity, and think that they have a self-nature of their own, all of which rises from the discriminations of the mind, and is perpetuated by habit, energy, and from which they are given over to false imagination. It is all like a mirage in which springs of water are seen as if they were real. They are thus imagined by animals who, made thirsty by the heat of the season, run after them. Animals, not knowing that the springs are an hallucination of their own minds, do not realize that there are no such springs. In the same way, Mahamati, the ignorant and simple-minded, their minds burning with the fires of greed, anger, and folly, finding delight in a world of multitudinous forms, their thoughts obsessed with ideas of birth, growth, and destruction, not well understanding what is meant by existent and non-existent, and being impressed by the erroneous discriminations and speculations, since beginningless time, fall into the habit of grasping this and that, and thereby becoming attached to them. It is like the city of the Gandharvas, which the unwitting take to be a real city, though it is not so in fact. The city appears as in a vision owing to their attachment to the memory of a city, preserved in the mind as a seed. The city can thus be said to be both existent and non-existent. In the same way, clinging to the memory of erroneous speculations and doctrines accumulated since beginningless time, they hold fast to such ideas as oneness and otherness, being and non-being, and their thoughts are not at all clear as to what after all is only seen of the mind. It is like a man dreaming in his sleep of a country that seems to be filled with various men, women, elephants, horses, cars, pedestrians, villages, towns, hamlets, cows, buffaloes, mansions, woods, mountains, rivers, and lakes, and who moves about in that city until he is awakened. As he lies half awake, he recalls the city of his dreams and reviews his experiences there. What do you think, Mahamati? Is this dreamer who is letting his mind dwell upon the various unrealities he has seen in his dream, is he to be considered wise or foolish? In the same way, the ignorant and simple-minded who are favorably influenced by the erroneous views of the philosophers do not recognize that the views that are influencing them are only dream-like ideas originating in the mind itself, and consequently they are held fast by their notions of oneness and otherness, of being and non-being. It is like a painter's canvas on which the ignorant imagine they see the elevations and depressions of mountains and valleys. In the same way, there are people today being brought up under the influence of similar erroneous views of oneness and otherness, of bothness and not bothness, whose mentality is being conditioned by the habit, energy of these false imaginings, and who later on will declare those who hold the true doctrine of no birth, which is free from the alternatives of being and non-being, to be nihilists, and by so doing will bring themselves and others to ruin. By the natural law of cause and effect, these followers of pernicious views uproot meritorious causes that otherwise would lead to unstained purity. They are to be shunned by those whose desires are for more excellent things. It is like the dim-eyed ones who, seeing a hairnet, exclaim to one another, "It is wonderful! Look, honorable sirs, it is wonderful!" But the hairnet has never existed. In fact, it is neither an entity nor a non-entity, for it has both been seen and has not been seen. In the same manner, those whose minds have been addicted to the discriminations of the erroneous views cherished by the philosophers, which are given over to the realistic views of being and non-being, will contradict the good Dharma and will end in the destruction of themselves and others. It is like a wheel of fire made by a revolving firebrand, which is no wheel, but which is imagined to be one by the ignorant. Nor is it not a wheel, because it has not been seen by some. By the same reasoning, those who are in the habit of listening to the discriminations and views of the philosophers will regard things born as non-existent and those destroyed by causation as existent. It is like a mirror reflecting colors and images, as determined by conditions, but without any partiality. It is like the echo of the wind that gives the sound of a human voice. It is like a mirage of moving water seen in a desert. In the same way, the discriminating mind of the ignorant, which has been heated by false imaginations and speculations, is stirred into mirage, like waves by the winds of birth, growth, and destruction. It is like the magician Pisaka, who by means of his spells makes a wooden image or a dead body to throb with life, though it has no power of its own. In the same way, the ignorant and the simple-minded, committing themselves to erroneous philosophical views, become thoroughly devoted to the ideas of oneness and otherness, but their confidence is not well grounded. For this reason, Mahamati, you and other Bodhisattvas should cast off all discriminations leading to the notions of birth, abiding, and destructions, of oneness and otherness, of bothness and not bothness, of being and non-being, and thus getting free of the bondage of habit, energy, become able to attain the reality, realizable within yourselves, of noble wisdom. Then said Mahamati to the Blessed One, "Why is it that the ignorant are given up to discrimination, and the wise are not?" The Blessed One replied, "It is because the ignorant cling to names, signs, and ideas. As their minds move along these channels, they feed on multiplicities of objects, and fall into the notion of ego, soul, and what belongs to it. They make discriminations of good and bad among appearances, and cling to the agreeable. As they thus cling, there is a reversion to ignorance, and karma born of greed, anger, and folly is accumulated. As the accumulation of karma goes on, they become imprisoned in a cocoon of discrimination, and are thenceforth unable to free themselves from the round of birth and death. Because of folly, they do not understand that all things are like Maya, like the reflection of the moon in water, that there is no self, substance to be imagined as an ego, soul and its belongings, and that all their definitive ideas rise from their false discriminations of what exists only as it is seen of the mind itself. They do not realize that things have nothing to do with qualified and qualifying, nor with the course of birth, abiding, and destruction, and instead they assert that they are born of a creator, a time of atoms of some celestial spirit. It is because the ignorant are given up to discrimination that they move along with the stream of appearances, but it is not so with the wise. Chapter Roman 2, False Imagination and Knowledge of Appearances. Then Mahamati, the Bodhisattva spoke to the Blessed One, saying, "You speak of the erroneous views of the philosophers. Will you please tell us of them, that we may be on our guard against them?" The Blessed One replied, saying, "Mahamati, the error in these erroneous teachings that are generally held by the philosophers lies in this. They do not recognize that the objective world rises from the mind itself. They do not understand that the whole mind system also rises from the mind itself, but depending upon these manifestations of the mind as being real, they go on discriminating them. Like the simple-minded ones that they are, cherishing the dualism of this and that of being and non-being, ignorant of the fact that there is but one common essence. On the contrary, my teaching is based upon the recognition that the objective world, like a vision, is a manifestation of the mind itself. It teaches the cessation of ignorance, desire, deed, and causality. It teaches the cessation of suffering that arises from the discriminations of the triple world. There are some Brahman scholars who, assuming something out of nothing, assert that there is a substance bound up with causation which abides in time, and that the elements that make up personality and its environment have their genesis and continuation in causation, and after thus existing, pass away. Then there are other scholars who hold a destructive and nihilistic view concerning such subjects as continuation, activity, breaking up, existence, nirvana, the path, karma, fruition, and truth. Why? Because they have not attained an intuitive understanding of truth itself, and therefore they have no clear insight into the fundamentals of things. They are like a jar broken into pieces which is no longer able to function as a jar. They are like a burnt seed which is no longer capable of sprouting. But the elements that make up personality and its environment, which they regard as subject to change, are really incapable of uninterrupted transformations. Their views are based upon erroneous discriminations of the objective world. They are not based upon the true conception. Again, if it is true that something comes out of nothing and there is the rise of the mind, system by reason of the combination of the three effect producing causes, we could say the same of any non-existing thing, for instance, that a tortoise could grow hair or sand produce oil. This proposition is of no avail, it ends in affirming nothing. It follows that the deed, work, and cause of which they speak is of no use, and so also is their reference to being and non-being. If they argue that there is a combination of the three effect producing causes, they must do it on the principle of cause and effect, that is, that something comes out of something and not out of nothing. As long as a world of relativity is asserted, there is an ever-recurring chain of causation which cannot be denied under any circumstance. Therefore, we cannot talk of anything coming to an end or a cessation. As long as these scholars remain on their philosophical ground, their demonstration must conform to logic and their textbooks, and the memory, habit of erroneous intellection will ever cling to them. To make the matter worse, the simple-minded ones, poisoned by this erroneous view, will declare this incorrect way of thinking taught by the ignorant to be the same as that presented by the all-knowing one, but the way of instruction presented by the Tathagatas is not based on assertions and refutations by means of words and logic. There are four forms of assertion that can be made concerning things not in existence, namely, assertions made about individual marks that are not in existence, about objects that are not in existence, about a cause that is non-existent, and about philosophical views that are erroneous. By refutation is meant that one, because of ignorance, has not examined properly the error that lies at the base of these assertions. The assertion about individual marks that really have no existence concerns the distinctive marks as perceived by the eye, ear, nose, etc., as indicating individuality and generality in elements that make up personality and its external world, and then taking these marks for reality and getting attached to them, to get into the habit of affirming that things are just so and not otherwise. The assertion about objects that are non-existent is an assertion that rises from attachment to these associated marks of individuality and generality. Objects in themselves are neither in existence nor in non-existence, and are quite devoid of the alternative of being and non-being, and should only be thought of as one thinks of the horns of a hare, a horse, or a camel, which never existed. Objects are discriminated by the ignorant who are addicted to assertion and negation, because their intelligence has not been acute enough to penetrate into the truth that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself. The assertion of a cause that is non-existent assumes the causeless birth of the first element of the mind, system which later on comes to have only a Maya-like non-existence. That is to say, there are philosophers who assert that an originally unborn mind, system begins to function under the conditions of eye, form, light, and memory, which functioning goes on for a time and then ceases. This is an example of a cause that is non-existent. The assertion of philosophical views concerning the elements that make up personality and its environing world that are non-existent, assume the existence of an ego, a being, a soul, a living being, a nourisher, or a spirit. This is an example of philosophical views that are not true. It is this combination of discrimination of imaginary marks of individuality, grouping them and giving them a name and becoming attached to them as objects by reason of habit, energy that has been accumulating since beginningless time, that one builds up erroneous views whose only basis is false imagination. For this reason, Bodhisattvas should avoid all discussions relating to assertions and negations whose only basis is words and logic. Word discrimination goes on by the coordination of brain, chest, nose, throat, palate, lips, tongue, teeth, and lips. Words are neither different nor not different from discrimination. Words rise from discrimination as their cause. If words were different from discrimination, they could not have discrimination for their cause. Then again, if words are not different, they could not carry and express meaning. Words, therefore, are produced by causation, and are mutually conditioning and shifting, and, just like things, are subject to birth and destruction. There are 4 kinds of word discrimination, all of which are to be avoided because they are alike unreal. First, there are the words indicating individual marks, which rise from discriminating forms and signs as being real in themselves, and then becoming attached to them. There are memory, words which rise from the unreal surroundings which come before the mind when it recalls some previous experience. Then, there are words growing out of attachment to the erroneous distinctions and speculations of the mental processes. And finally, there are words growing out of inherited prejudices as seeds of habit, energy have accumulated since beginningless time, or which had their origin in some long-forgotten clinging to false imagination and erroneous speculations. Then there are words where there are no corresponding objects, as for instance, the hare's horns, a barren woman's child, etc. There are no such things, but we have the words just the same. Words are an artificial creation. There are Buddha lands where there are no words. In some Buddha lands, ideas are indicated by looking steadily, in others by gestures, in still others by a frown, by a movement of the eyes, by laughing, by yawning, by the clearing of the throat, or by trembling. For instance, in the Buddha land of the Tathagata Samantabhadra Bodhisattvas, by a dhyana transcending words and ideas, attain the recognition of all things as unborn, and they also experience various most excellent samadhi, his that transcend words. Even in this world, such specialized beings as ants and bees carry on their activities very well without recourse to words. No, Mahamati, the validity of things is independent of the validity of words. Moreover, there are other things that belong to words, namely the syllable, body of words, the name, body of words, and the sentence, body of words. By syllable, body is meant that by which words and sentences are set up or indicated. There is a reason for some syllables, some are mnemonic, and some are chosen arbitrarily. By name, body is meant the object depending upon which a name, word obtains its significance, or in other words, name. Body is the substance of a name, word. By sentence, body is meant the completion of the meaning by expressing the word more fully in a sentence. The name for this sentence, body, is suggested by the footprints left in the road by elephants, horses, people, deer, cattle, goats, etc. But neither words nor sentences can exactly express meanings, for words are only sweet sounds that are arbitrarily chosen to represent things. They are not the things themselves, which in turn are only manifestations of mind. Discrimination of meaning is based upon the false imagination that these sweet sounds which we call words, and which are dependent upon whatever subjects they are supposed to stand for, and which subjects are supposed to be self-existent, all of which is based on error. Disciples should be on their guard against the seductions of words and sentences and their elusive meanings, for by them the ignorant and the dull-witted become entangled and helpless as an elephant floundering about in the deep mud. Words and sentences are produced by the law of causation and are mutually conditioning. They cannot express highest reality. Moreover, in highest reality, there are no differentiations to be discriminated, and there is nothing to be predicated in regard to it. Highest reality is an exalted state of bliss. It is not a state of word, discrimination, and it cannot be entered into by mere statements concerning it. The Tathagatas have a better way of teaching, namely, through self-realization of noble wisdom. Mahamati said, ask the Blessed One, pray tell us about the causation of all things whereby I and other Bodhisattvas may see into the nature of causation and may no more discriminate it as to the gradual or simultaneous rising of all things. The Blessed One replied, there are two factors of causation by reason of which all things come into seeming existence, external and internal factors. The external factors are a lump of clay, a stick, a wheel, a thread, water, a worker, and his labor, the combination of all of which produces a jar. As with a jar which is made from a lump of clay, or a piece of cloth made from thread, or matting made from fragrant grass, or a sprout growing out of a seed, or fresh butter made from sour milk by a man churning it, so it is with all things which appear one after another in continuous succession. As regards the inner factors of causation, they are of such kinds as ignorance, desire, purpose, all of which enter into the idea of causation. Born of these two factors, there is the manifestation of personality and the individual things that make up its environment, but they are not individual and distinctive things, they are only so discriminated by the ignorant. Causation may be divided into 6 elements: indifference, cause, dependence, cause, possibility, cause, agency, cause, objectivity, cause, manifesting, cause. Indifference. Cause means that if there is no discrimination present, there is no power of combination present, and so no combination takes place, or if present, there is dissolution. Dependence. Cause means that the elements must be present. Possibility. Cause means that when a cause is to become effective, there must be a suitable meeting of conditions, both internal and external. Agency. Cause means that there must be a principle vested with supreme authority, like a sovereign king present and asserting itself. Objectivity. Cause means that to be a part of the objective world, the mind, system must be in existence and must be keeping up its continuous activity. Manifesting. Cause means that as the discriminating faculty of the mind, system becomes busy, individual marks will be revealed as forms are revealed by the light of a lamp. All causes are thus seen to be the outcome of discrimination carried on by the ignorant and simple-minded, and there is, therefore, no such thing as gradual or simultaneous rising of existence. If such a thing as the gradual rising of existence is asserted, it can be disproved by showing that there is no basic substance to hold the individual signs together which makes a gradual rising impossible. If simultaneous rising of existence is asserted, there would be no distinction between cause and effect, and there will be nothing to characterize a cause as such. While a child is not yet born, the term father has no significance. Logicians argue that there is that which is born and that which gives birth by the mutual functioning of such causal factors as cause, substance, continuity, acceleration, etc. And so they conclude that there is a gradual rising of existence, but this gradual rising does not obtain except by reason of attachment to the notion of self-nature. When ideas of body, property, and abode are seen, discriminated and cherished in what after all is nothing but what is conceived by the mind itself, an external world is perceived under the aspect of individuality and generality, which, however, are not realities, and therefore neither a gradual nor a simultaneous rising of things is possible. It is only when the mind, system comes into activity and discriminates the manifestations of mind that existence can be said to come into view. For these reasons, Mahamati, you must get rid of notions of gradation and simultaneity in the combination of causal activities. Mahamati said, Blessed One, to what kind of discrimination and to what kind of thoughts should the term, false imagination, be applied? The Blessed One replied, so long as people do not understand the true nature of the objective world, they fall into the dualistic view of things. They imagine the multiplicity of external objects to be real and become attached to them, and are nourished by their habit, energy. Because of this, a system of mentation mind and what belongs to it is discriminated and is thought of as real. This leads to the assertion of an ego, soul and its belongings, and thus the mind system goes on functioning. Depending upon and attaching itself to the dualistic habit of mind, they accept the views of the philosophers founded upon these erroneous distinctions of being and non-being, existence and non-existence, and there evolves what we call false imaginations. But Mahamati, discrimination does not evolve, nor is it put away, because when all that is seen is truly recognized to be nothing but the manifestation of mind, how can discrimination as regards being and non-being evolve? It is for the sake of the ignorant who are addicted to the discrimination of the multiplicity of things which are of their own mind, that it is said by me that discrimination takes its rise owing to attachment to the aspect of multiplicity which is characteristic of objects. How otherwise can the ignorant and simple-minded recognize that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself, and how otherwise can they gain an insight into the true nature of mind and be able to free themselves from wrong conceptions of cause and effect? How otherwise can they gain a clear conception of the Bodhisattva stages and attain a turning about in the deepest seat of their consciousness, and finally attain an inner self-realization of noble wisdom which transcends the 5 dharmas, the 3 self-natures, and the whole idea of a discriminated reality? For this reason is it said by me that discrimination takes its rise from the mind becoming attached to the multiplicities of things which in themselves are not real, and that emancipation comes from thoroughly understanding the meaning of reality as it truly is. False imaginations rise from the consideration of appearances. Things are discriminated as to form, signs, and shape, as to having color, warmth, humidity, motility, or rigidity. False imagination consists in becoming attached to these appearances and their names. By attachment to objects is meant the getting attached to inner and outer things as if they were real. By attachment to names is meant the recognition in these inner and outer things of the characteristic marks of individuation and generality, and to regard them as definitely belonging to the name of the objects. False imagination teaches that because all things are bound up with causes and conditions of habit, energy that has been accumulating since beginningless time, by not recognizing that the external world is of mind itself, all things are comprehensible under the aspects of individuality and generality. By reason of clinging to these false imaginations, there is multitudinousness of appearances which are imagined to be real, but which are only imaginary. To illustrate, when a magician, depending on grass, wood, shrubs, and creepers, exercises his art, many shapes and beings take form that are only magically created. Sometimes they even make figures that have bodies and that move and act like human beings. They are variously and fancifully discriminated, but there is no reality in them. Everyone but children and the simple-minded know that they are not real. Likewise, based upon the notion of relativity, false imagination perceives a variety of appearances which the discriminating mind proceeds to objectify and name, and become attached to, and memory and habit energy perpetuate. Here is all that is necessary to constitute the self-nature of false imagination. The various features of false imagination can be distinguished as follows. As regards words, meaning, individual marks, property, self-nature, cause, philosophical views, reasoning, birth, dependence, bondage, and emancipation. Discrimination of words is the becoming attached to various sounds carrying familiar meanings. Discrimination of meaning comes when one imagines that words rise depending upon whatever subjects they express, and which subjects are regarded as self-existent. Discrimination of individual marks is to imagine that whatever is denoted in words concerning the multiplicities of individual marks, which in themselves are like a mirage, is true, and clinging tenaciously to them. To discriminate all things according to such categories as warmth, fluidity, motility, and solidity. Discrimination of property is to desire a state of wealth, such as gold, silver, and various precious stories. Discrimination of self-nature is to make discriminations according to the views of the philosophers in reference to the self-nature of all things which they imagine and stoutly maintain to be true. saying, "This is just what it is, and it cannot be otherwise." Discrimination of cause is to distinguish the notion of causation in reference to being and non-being, and to imagine that there are such things as cause, signs. Discrimination of philosophical views means considering different views relating to the notions of being and non-being, oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness, existence and non-existence, all of which are erroneous, and becoming attached to particular views. Discrimination of reasoning means the teaching whose reasoning is based on the grasping of the notion of an ego, substance, and what belongs to it. Discrimination of birth means getting attached to the notion that things come into existence and pass out of existence according to causation. Discrimination of no birth is to see that causeless substances which were not come into existence by reason of causation. Discrimination of dependence means the mutual dependence of gold and the filament made of it. Discrimination of bondage and imagination is like imagining that there is something bound because of something binding, as in the case of a man who ties a knot and loosens one. These are the various features of false imagination, to which all the ignorant and simple-minded cling. Those attached to the notion of relativity are attached to the notion of the multitudinousness of things which arises from false imagination. It is like seeing varieties of objects depending upon Maya, but these varieties thus revealing themselves are discriminated by the ignorant as something other than Maya itself, according to their way of thinking. Now the truth is, Maya and varieties of objects are neither different nor not different. If they were different, varieties of objects would not have Maya for their characteristic. If they are not different, there would be no distinction between them. But as there is a distinction, these two Maya and varieties of objects are neither different nor not different, for the very good reason they are one thing. Mahamati said to the Blessed One, "Is error an entity or not?" The Blessed One replied, "Error has no character in it making for attachment. If error had such a character, no liberation would be possible from its attachment to existence, and the chain of origination would only be understood in the sense of creation as upheld by the philosophers. Error is like Maya also, and as Maya is incapable from producing other Maya, so error in itself cannot produce error. It is discrimination and attachment that produce evil thoughts and faults. Moreover, Maya has no power of discrimination in itself. It only rises when invoked by the charm of the magician. Error has in itself no habit energy. Habit energy only rises from discrimination and attachment. Error in itself has no faults. Faults are due to the confused discriminations fondly cherished by the ignorant concerning the ego, soul, and its mind. The wise have nothing to do either with Maya or error. Maya, however, is not an unreality because it only has the appearance of reality. All things have the nature of Maya. It is not because all things are imagined and clung to because of the multitudinous of individual signs that they are like Maya. It is because they are alike unreal and as quickly appearing and disappearing. Being attached to erroneous thoughts, they confuse and contradict themselves and others. As they do not clearly grasp the fact that the world is no more than mind itself, they imagine and cling to causation, work, birth, and individual signs, and their thoughts are characterized by error and false imaginations. The teaching that all things are characterized by the self-nature of Maya and a dream is meant to make the ignorant and simple-minded cast aside the idea of self-nature in anything. False imagination teaches that such things as light and shade, long and short, black and white are different and are to be discriminated, but they are not independent of each other. They are only different aspects of the same thing. They are terms of relation, not of reality. Conditions of existence are not of a mutually exclusive character. In essence, things are not two, but one. Even nirvana and samsara's world of life and death are aspects of the same thing, for there is no nirvana except where is samsara, and no samsara except where is nirvana. All duality is falsely imagined. Mahamati, you and all the Bodhisattvas should discipline yourselves in the realization and patient acceptance of the truths of the emptiness, unbornness, no self, natureness, and the non-duality of all things. This teaching is found in all the sutras of all the Buddhas, and is presented to meet the varied dispositions of all beings, but it is not the truth itself. These teachings are only a finger pointing toward noble wisdom. They are like a mirage with its springs of water, which the deer take to be real and chase after. So with the teachings in all the sutras, they are intended for the consideration and guidance of the discriminating minds of all people, but they are not the truth itself, which can only be self-realized within one's deepest consciousness. Mahamati, you and all the Bodhisattvas must seek for this inner self-realization of noble wisdom, and be not captivated by word, teaching,